The Honourable Member for Dabadi-Umera.
Madam Speaker, I first wish to thank my God and Father for granting me the opportunity to join my colleagues as a member of this august House, and secondly, to be able to take part in this debate on the Appropriations Bill. As you would be aware, this is in fact my maiden contribution in Parliament. And before I delve into the business at hand, it would be remiss of me not to take the opportunity to congratulate you formally on your appointment as Speaker of this Honourable Chamber. In just one formal sitting of the House, you set a refreshing new tone in the conduct of the office. I look forward to fulfilling my duties as a Member of Parliament under your respectful guidance. Secondly, I would like to thank the Honourable Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, for entrusting me with the responsibility for the ministerial portfolio of public utilities. And I make my commitment here in the House to my colleagues and the broader national community to not only serve with integrity, but also to lead a charge towards the transformation of the utilities sector. Madam Speaker, my acknowledgement would not be complete without thanking the constituents of Dabadi-Umera for electing me as their representative in this Honourable House for the next 5 years. Last, by no means least, I must take this opportunity to congratulate my colleague, the Minister of Finance, for the delivery of an excellent budget speech. The theme, restoring confidence and rebuilding true trust. Let's do this together. It's the most fitting approach to the policies that this administration must adopt to charge the cost of economic recovery for Trinidad and Tobago. Informed by this philosophy, I intend to serve the national community with distinction and to restore the confidence and trust in good governance of the affairs of this nation. Madam Speaker, the impact of the utility sector is unrivaled by any other sector, as it is the foundation upon which all activity in any society rests. The utility sector touches the lives of every inhabitant of our Twin Island Republic. Every day, 24 hours a day. And it breathes life into every aspect of economic activity in our country. The public utility sector has been allowed the sum of $4.425 billion. And in my contribution, I propose to outline to you and my colleagues in this Honourable House the policies, strategies and programs to be implemented by the ministry and agencies under the purview of the ministry over the coming fiscal year, aimed at restoring public confidence and rebuilding the nation's trust in the management and development of the utilities sector. Madam Speaker, to fully understand the importance and the impact of my ministry's proposal for the use of this year's budgetary allocation, I crave your indulgence and that of my colleagues to take a brief journey down memory lane and examine the previous administration's performance in the utility sector. The major highlights included the dismantling of the Ministry of Public Utilities with the creation of the Ministry of the Environment and Water Resources, affectionately known to the masses by the Ministry of WASA. They installed a minister who gained a reputation in the country for declaring that he laid pipe all over the country. Plenty water, pipe, but little water. Madam Speaker, in spite of an aggressive "Your Government Working For You" media campaign, costing taxpayers millions of dollars, acute water shortages and leaking pipelines continue to plague many communities, especially in northern Trinidad and Tobago and in Tobago. Furthermore, there are still communities without an adequate supply of water for months on end. The postal sector did not escape unscathed as well, as was plagued by service delivery issues over the course of the last 5 years. The current situation in the utility sector is unfortunately very grave. It's by no means an easy task to stem the tide of public dissatisfaction in the performance of the utility sector. I am proud to say that this administration is up to the challenge, and the first bold step in that direction has already been taken through the restoration of the portfolio of the Ministry of Public Utilities. Meteorological Services Division, the Water and Sewage Authority, the Community-Based Environmental Protection Enhancement Program Company, CPEP, and the Trinidad and Tobago Solid Waste Management Company Limited are now back in their rightful home. And the ministry has welcomed a new addition to the Public Utilities family, the Maintenance, Training and Security Company Limited, MTS. The sector now holds, once again, with responsibility for all utilities, inclusive of the environmental management of solid waste and wastewater, being put under the umbrella of one ministry. I'm not sure if it is possible for me to underscore the importance of this strategic decision, because whereas over the last 5 years, policies were designed to facilitate nepotism and cronyism, which is the essence for job for the boys and girls, with attendant inefficiencies and avenues for corruption that characterize such an approach. This administration has adopted an approach that facilitates proper management and economic planning for the growth of the sector. A platform upon which the government can harness the natural synergies that exist in the sector to improve performance, service delivery. And most importantly, the realignment of the public utilities portfolio lends itself to more efficient monitoring and evaluation of the performance of the sector. Madam Speaker, I now turn to the policies, strategies, and programs to be implemented by the ministry and the agencies under its purview within the upcoming fiscal year. And we start with the manner in which the Ministry of Public Utilities will fulfill its mandate and give life to the social programs which contribute to the realization of the government priority initiatives for fiscal 2016. This year, the government economic policy has special focal initiatives. Time does not permit me to mention all 14 initiatives. However, the most relevant to the public utility sector are the introduction of a retiree benefits program involving free or subsidized public services, subsidizing and promoting the use of renewable energy sources in residential and commercial sectors, in particular, the introduction of renewable sources of electricity generation through solar power and wind power. Initiate a process for free island-wide public broadband wireless networking, starting with free public hotspots in particular areas. And I've indicated to my colleague from Tobago East that we would target the village of Hermitage in Tobago for both water as well as hotspots, because they are without an adequate water supply. So we target them. So within a short space of time, you will get both water and internet broadband. With respect to the latter, my ministry will be undertaking the relevant studies to see how best this initiative can be implemented within the existing public utilities framework. However, with respect to the Retirees Benefit Program and the Renewable Energies Initiative, I am proud to report that the utility sector has programs in place that will contribute to the realization of these priorities. Adequate funding has been allocated to the implementation of these programs. Madam Speaker, the first program geared towards retirees is a Utilities Assistance Program. This social intervention strategy provides financial assistance to eligible citizens to ensure their continued access to basic utilities such as water and electricity. This government has pledged to focus on the needs of the retired, the socially displaced, and differently abled population of Trinidad and Tobago. And the UAP program is aimed at enhancing the real income of beneficiaries by cushioning the effects of the rising cost of public utilities. The program is managed and facilitated by the Ministry of Public Utilities in collaboration with the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, the Water and Sewage Authority, WASA, the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission, TNTEC. The UAP comprises three components. They are bill assistance. For fiscal year 2016, the Ministry of Public Utilities will continue to provide utility bill assistance to 15,000 householders who are low-income customers of WASA and TNTEC. These householders include pensioners, disabled persons, and other low-income persons, and will allow them to continue to access basic utilities of electricity and water despite our current economic challenges. The UAP provides a subsidy to low-income households by assisting with the payment of their utility bills. Solar panel assistance. In recognition of the importance of utilizing renewable energy source, especially in areas where it is difficult or impossible to access conventional electricity services, the MPU, the Ministry of Public Utilities, intend to provide solar panels to low-income households that are without access to the electricity grid. These will be households located away from the electricity grid due to terrain, distance, or other challenges. Water tank assistance. The UAP intends to also provide water tanks to 350 low-income households and 50 community facilities that suffer from a lack of water supply and face challenges with proper water storage. The component of the program will be reviewed in light of the fact that there are areas throughout the country that, despite being connected to the water distribution system, they are still unable to enjoy a moderate supply. The UAP will revise its policy to give special consideration to those households that are most vulnerable, such as our pensioners, persons with disabilities, and those whose children, in order to improve their living conditions. For fiscal 2016, the European intervention strategy, through its various components, will be provided at a value of $6.8 million. The Utilities Assistance Program will align to the government promise for independent and scientific monitoring and evaluation procedures and be assessed to ensure that it is providing the intended benefits to its beneficiaries with special focus on our retirees and persons with disabilities. The Ministry of Public Utilities understands the importance of information to persons who are in need of services such as those offered under its Utility Assistance Program. As such, the Ministry will undertake a targeted public education campaign to increase awareness of these utility programs. Creative ways will be utilized to ensure that our pensioners and persons with disabilities, in addition to other vulnerable groups, can access these benefits. Madam Speaker, the Ministry is in full alignment with government policy and there is a firm commitment on the part of the government to ensure adequate financing of these initiatives. I now turn my attention to the agencies and will begin by treating the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission. This administration is fully committed to providing a safe, reliable, and affordable source of electricity to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago and to the various sectors that drive our economy, such as the industrial sector, the manufacturing sector, tourism sector, and the energy sector. A stable, reliable, and affordable source of electricity is one of the key ingredients in encouraging economic development, entrepreneurship, and facilitating improvement in the quality of life and standards of living of the citizens of this great land. This administration therefore intends to work alongside and support the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission in delivery of a suite of projects and programs. An overall allocation of $97 million have been allocated to TNTech in 2016 for the financing of projects relating to elimination of public spaces, street lighting, illumination of recreation grounds, increasing the production and delivery of bulk power. In order to meet the energy needs of Trinidad and Tobago, TNTech has embarked upon a program to expand the national grid to ensure that bulk power generated at power stations is delivered to the various load centers across the Twin Island Republic. A sum of $49.5 million has been provided for transmission and infrastructural works to accommodate the projected growth in load demand. The commercial, industrial, and residential sectors in Trinidad and Tobago from 1,400 megawatts to 3,000 megawatts. Towards this end, TNTech has embarked on a program to expand the national grid to ensure a safe and reliable supply of bulk power generated at power stations is delivered to the various load centers. In 2016, TNTech intends to expand its existing bulk power framework. Special emphasis on the Sister Isle as projects are carded for diversion of the Milford-Scarborough Circuit, Scarborough Substation, and Studley Park Substation. In Trinidad, TNTech plans to focus on the upgrade of the Pinto Road 66 kV substation, the St. James Substation. Allocations have already been made with new bulk power projects relative to transmission system expansion. These projects are intended to further reinforce the national grid and include the construction of substations, overhead lines, cable projects to cater for the delivery of power to load centers in Trinidad, including the upgrading of this Westmoreland substation and associated transmission circuit to meet the anticipated load growth in the Northwest Peninsula, and the establishment of San Rafael Piarco transmission line to provide increased reliability and security of supply to Piarco, inclusive of Piarco Airport. The second aim of TNTech projects demonstrates the government's commitment to improving the environmental efficiency and cost efficiency of electricity transmission onto the national grid. TNTech has therefore received funding to acquire the additional transmission infrastructure to move more power from Trinidad Generation Unlimited, TGU, onto the national grid, as TGU is the most cost-efficient and environmentally efficient power plant in the country. Trinidad and Tobago Postal Corporation. One of the hallmarks of a developed economy is the existence of an efficient and effective postal service, which meets society's commercial and social needs. A robust postal sector is therefore at the heart of the efficient social needs. A robust postal sector is therefore at the heart of the efficient functioning of the economy and is a critical success factor in the maintenance of social cohesion, economic development, and competitiveness. Very few industries have the physical connectivity with the nation's residential household, commercial networks, and the industrial underpinnings of a country's economy. Madam Speaker, it is the intention of this administration to guide TT Post and the postal sector with a view to transforming its operations and making it commercially viable and a flagship model postal carrier in the region. This administration commitment to achieving this status is reflected in the allocation of funding to TT Post for the fiscal period 2016. The postal sector has received approximately $13.5 million for projects aimed at improving the efficiency of its operations in the following areas. Firstly, the security infrastructure upgrade. The acceptance of monies from customers in exchange for postal services and the purchase of postal stamps, articles such as stamps, has traditionally been a primary function of any postal operation. Furthermore, TT Post delivers social welfare checks for and on behalf of the government. The inflow of cash from these activities has and will continue to draw the attention of criminal elements. TT Post recognizes its inherent responsibility to provide a safe working environment for its staff, as well as to provide the necessary conditions for the general public to conduct business with confidence within a secure environment. Madam Speaker, there is also a project aimed at an information technology infrastructure upgrade. In order to improve its information technology infrastructure, TT Post has received allocations for the acquisition of the following on a phased basis: a postal operation enterprise, wide management information system, an electronic records management system, and a human resource information system. Thirdly, TT Post has received allocations for the upgrade of its transport fleet. The vehicles utilized by the Transport Department are critical to the efficient function of the core postal operations and satisfying on-time mail clearance. The plan proposes a continued phased replacement of the remainder of the fleet. Madam Speaker, I can declare with confidence that under the stewardship of this administration, the postal sector will be revolutionized, thereby restoring trust and confidence in the delivery of service in the aspect of the utilities sector. Madam Speaker, having dealt with the plans for the electricity sector and the postal sector, I now turn my attention to the water sector. It is a very heavy heart that I commence the segment of my contribution choosing the Water and Sewage Authority, as well as along with the Ministry of Public Utilities, is in mourning. You all would have read about the untimely passing of Mr. Derek Hooker. Permit me the opportunity to extend condolences to his family on behalf of the Ministry of Public Utilities. He was a true servant of the country and a great loss, not just to Water and Sewage Authority, but also to the national community. Madam Speaker, the water sector in Trinidad and Tobago is facing severe challenges which affect the reliability of the nation's supply to meet current demands and efficient planning to ensure the sustainability of our nation's water supply for future generations. These challenges include, but not limited to, age and inadequate infrastructure to serve the needs of the national community to maintain water security, and inadequate mechanisms to assess water availability and to implement systems to encourage the protection and conservation of water resources. Madam Speaker, as Minister of Public Utilities, I have inherited a water and sewage authority that is burdened with massive debt and financially strapped for funds. The operating deficit is $1.6 billion. Receivables are $338.9 million. And the overdraft is $403.1 million.
Honorable member. Somebody's phone, could you please be guided by the standing order? Could everybody please check that their phone is either off, on silent, or remove it from the microphone? Thank you. Could you kindly proceed, honorable member for Guyadeen-Gopeesingh?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The operating deficit, and I repeat, the operating deficit is 1.6 billion. Receivables are 338.9 million, and overdraft is 403.1 million, fast approaching the limit of $420 million. The authority governance structures are weak. Not surprising, the morale of employees at the authority is at a very low ebb. In this regard, Madam Speaker, the former minister in the disbanded Ministry of WASA embarked on an extensive and expensive program of laying pipe throughout the country, with special emphasis on the constituencies represented by members on the other side. Now, I listened here over the last few days in the debate, and one of the hallmarks of their presentation was on equity, that the previous government was a government who was equitable in the distribution of resources throughout Trinidad and Tobago. I listened attentively to them. I heard Komuto Manzanella, Arima, Couva North, Caroni Central, Tabakit, the range of them. Now let me just delve into this allocation of resources in terms of these pipeline projects in the 41 constituencies. I will leave out the largest allocations and the lowest allocations as well. And I will choose 6 constituencies for my colleagues on the other side and 6 constituencies from our side. And we will see about this equitable distribution of resources by the former minister in the Ministry of WASA.
Number 6 of applying your mind.
Caroni Central.
6.
It says in this report they have 100% customer receive water 24/7. They had 48 projects at a cost of $39,194,000. Caroni East, 86 projects, a cost of $87,700,000. Shogunas East, 38 projects, cost of $46 million. Shogunas West, 67 projects, cost of $49 million. Couva North, 86 projects, a cost of $57 million. And Couva South, 77 projects, a cost of $46 million. That's on my colleagues on the other side with the equitable distribution. Now let's examine 6 constituencies on this side of the house. Diego Martin Central, 20 projects at a cost of $16 million. Diego Martin Northeast, 12 projects at a cost of $11 million.
And they made no request.
Labre, 21 projects, a cost of $7 million. Laventille East Mover, my colleagues talked about how they were neglected. 13 projects, a cost of $9 million. Laventille West, 9 projects for a cost of $6 million.
Wow.
Lopino, Bonner West, 12 projects for a cost of $6 million. When you add up the 6 constituencies on the other side of the house, you get 402 projects to a cost of $325 million.
About that,
When you add up the 6 on this side, you have 87 projects to a cost of $56 million.
Equity.
we want to know how many projects.
And if we just look at Mayaro had 51, I didn't mention them. Mayaro had 51 projects to a cost of $88 million. The projects in Mayaro alone was more than the projects on this side. You see, yeah, and I didn't want to just...
Nothing wrong with my errors.
I just didn't want to highlight the lower projects on this side of the house. But let me give you San Fernando East. They had 2 projects to a cost of $599,000. And San Fernando West had 1 project to a cost of $144,000. That was the equitable distribution of projects by the previous government on that side of the house. You want to see Arima? Moruga? Let me look for Moruga table land.
Mind your business.
You're all given the impression that there was a level playing field. I know resources were allocated when they were in government. There's another area I want to go into, Madam Speaker. It is public knowledge that there are a host of qualified contractors who perform road reinstatement works under the PURE program. WASA's board ratified these contractors, about 15 of them in total, under the premise that there would be equitable distribution of work. However, the equity was not to be, and we deal with this equity word again. As 2 contractors were allowed to feed at the throat,
What is your plan?
and would give millions of dollars to pave most of the roads after pipes were laid. That didn't stop there, Madam Speaker. There were instances of over-invoicing to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, taxpayer dollars. Invoices would come in for longer distances than roads paved, and no questions were asked. Another form of corruption was the use of WASA in-house crews to undertake works which were outsourced to contractors. In other words, Madam Speaker, the taxpaying public paid twice for the same scope of works. WASA paid the contractor, and then they would have paid the wages and other costs in the in-house crews of the same projects. And this was a sting in the tail of this pipeline explosion under the previous government. I will now give some examples of how this racket was carried out. Pipeline exercise involved different contracts and different aspects. First of all, you had to have a contract for somebody to dig the trenches and lay the pipes. And after that was completed, you would then have another contract for somebody to restore the road so it becomes usable by the population. In terms of pipe lane, you have a contract here for the lane of 4-inch 750 PVC mains on Rivulet Branch Road, Indian Trail, starting at the fire hydrant at the corner and ending at dead end of the street at washout valve. Invoice 753. No marker posts were visible. The distance approximates that which invoice. However, temporary restoration was billed for 2-meter trench width instead of 1 meter. So 1 meter trench was done, but the billing was for 2 meters. Separate invoices were sent for road restoration for the entire roadway. So only a portion of the road received the pipe, but the taxpayers paid for the paving of the entire roadway. In Couva Central, lane of 317 meters of 4-inch pipe mains at Coconut Drive, Bassa Hill, Couva. This is an approximate that was built.
Basta Hall, you're not too familiar.
Bassa Hall. I'm not too familiar with Bassa.
Central Trend.
No marker post visible though, one build. 2-meter trench with build. However, road permanently reinstated and built for by 2 contractors this time. Vijay and Vijay and Calco Limited. Laying of 370 meters of 4-inch pipe along Doyle Trace, Kelly Village, Caroni. This sound approximates that which was built. BOQ items found to be satisfactory on site as that bill. Residents complain that roadway becomes very muddy when it rains. They are also thankful for the supply, however, the water pressure is too low to reach their inside plumbing. And I'll tell you why they have problems sometimes with a road that is paved that becomes muddy afterwards. We go to the road works, the paving of the roads.
All right.
Road restoration at Bag and Trace, Chandago, Chase Village. Chandanago, Chase Village.
I'm going to give you a course in pronunciation.
Not a problem. Approximately 3,096 meters were invoiced. However, only 1,790 meters can be seen and measured. The contractor said that the MP for the area, and in brackets, Ramona, instructed him to pave other roads in the vicinity, which he did, and build the authority. WASA project manager approved. Road restoration 300 meters at Ragunanan Trace. Approximate 150 meters of paving, about 6 feet wide, and less than 1 inch thick, built for 300 meters of paving. Wow. Road restoration 300 meters, Ragunanan Trace. Another company, AGS.
So point of order, based on improper and
Imputed improper motive.
could you just elaborate on that, please?
He said that I gave instructions to the contractor to pave other roads. That is imputed improper motives.
I overrule that. I don't see anything improper in that. That is breaching.
It's not true, Madam Speaker.
Honorable member, I have already ruled on it. When I stand, please, everybody is supposed to sit. If it is, if you are saying it is untrue, that does not mean that he's imputing improper motives. You may wish to invoke another standing order, maybe to ask him to give way on the interruptions.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Restoration Road, 800 meters at Palm Avenue, Freeport. The entire road was paved, approximately 500 meters paved. However, the invoice was for 800 meters. 1 inch thick paving was done, but the invoice was for 3 inches. Actual tonnage used in terms of the aggregate, 451 tons. However, 585 tons were invoiced. Wow. No pavement marking stripes were found. Road restoration 520 meters at Sahadio Trace, Freeport. The entire road was paved. Approximately 400 meters paved, 520.
44.8, point of order, 44.8.
Clarify.
No.
This deals with a member who has spoken on a question may again be heard. That is the standing order you wish to invoke. Honorable member for Couva. North. Is that the standing order you wish to invoke?
Standing order to clarify for 2 minutes after the speaker has spoken.
That's with respect, this is on a question. This is his contribution to the debate. As I said, if you wish, you can invoke, you can seek to invoke another standing order, but he would have to give way.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Road restoration, 721 meters, Seram Trace, Freeport. Entire road paved, approximately 400 meters paved, 721 meters invoiced. Again, 1 inch thick paving, the invoice for 3 inches. Actual tonnage used, 340 tons. The amount claimed, 415 tons. No marking stripes were found. And the list goes on and on, Madam Speaker. Wow. On and on. I would not spend the entire evening going through this entire list. But this entire road paving exercise conducted under that defunct ministry that this present administration thought it wise to disband and bring back under the purview, back under the authority of public utilities, used the road paving exercise as a means of passing on sums to the contractors and other people because of over-invoicing in terms of their contracts. And in some instances, as I mentioned, and I could show here, more than one contractor would bill and put invoice for the same job. So, Madam Speaker, there are numerous instances of over-invoicing to the tunes of hundreds of millions of taxpayers' dollars. And of course, roads paved with substandard material that results in hardships to the taxpayers who paid for the roadworks. An example is Umia Road in Arima, one of the main tributaries through my constituency, that the mayor of Arima and all the constituency calls me daily because of road paving done by the previous administration, and the road was not properly restored. There is, however, hope on the horizon as the government policies for the reform of the water sector represents a comprehensive plan aimed at ensuring financial, environmental, and social sustainability of the sector. The Water and Sewage Authority, through the Ministry of Public Utilities, is the entity with the responsibility for executing the government's mandate in the water and sanitation sector. The proposed program of works to be undertaken in this fiscal period addresses rehabilitation and construction of major water and wastewater infrastructure and the reduction in demand for truck-borne potable water facilities, thereby decreasing our country's supply deficit imbalance. This fiscal year's allocation of the water sector demonstrates the People's National Movement Administration's firm commitment to the continuous investment in WASA that enables the development of infrastructure to support economic growth and to improve the quality of life and living conditions of citizens throughout Trinidad and Tobago. The program of works...
Speaker, 47-1.
47-1 what? A or B?
Hush.
Hush?
Is there a point of order?
47(1)B.
And therefore, the given way is up to the discretion to the honorable member.
No, Madam Speaker, I don't have much time. This year's fiscal allocation of the water sector demonstrates the administration's firm commitment to the continuous investment in WASA that enables the development of infrastructure to support economic growth and to improve the quality of life and living conditions of citizens.
Honorable member, your speaking time of 45 minutes is now spent. You're entitled to 10 additional minutes, during which I would ask you to kindly wind up.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The program of works is geared towards achievement of the reliability and sustainability of supply, introduction, system redundancies, expansion of the existing distribution network, construction and replacement of major transmission lines, increased production capacity. The time doesn't permit me to carry through my presentation on WASA, so I will move on. Madam Speaker, the days of, oh gosh, we forget Tobago are over. Madam Speaker, cries for development in rural communities are at an end. And I mentioned Hermitage earlier. And water and hotspots in Hermitage. The program of works clearly demonstrates the PNM, the government commitments to ensuring an equitable distribution of resources to all communities in Trinidad and Tobago. We understand the word equity and equitable distribution. Madam Speaker, I now turn my attention to the environmental component of the public utilities portfolio to deal with the solid waste management company. The government official policy framework identifies two major strategies for increasing environmental awareness and addressing issues related to waste management in the country. The government intends to establish a clear action plan for waste management that promotes recycling. And we have also put special focus on intensifying the environmental awareness program among children and youth with our nation schools, villages, and rural communities, with a view to promoting and understanding the central role of the environment in securing our nation's survival in the future. In this line, it will be also used to relaunch and the expansion of the popular 1980 character, Charlie, and Chase Charlie Away, that we would be using to sensitize the public as to their performance. The environmental component of the ministry's portfolio now includes the community-based environmental protection and enhancement program, CPEP. And I turn my attention to CPEP. The program CPEP central mission is to protect, enhance, and build communities through environmental entrepreneurship. CPEP seems to have lost its way, but in the years to come, we would be revising and returning CPEP to its original focus as we move forward. Madam Speaker, this brings me to the end of my contribution to the budget debate. Let me reiterate in my closing remarks my commitment to being a humble servant of the national community, a strong leader of the public utility sector dedicated to ensuring that the service delivery is improved to unparalleled levels of excellence.
Probably would have accepted that as the chief of the...
Consumer confidence and investor confidence is rebuilt in the sector. Mechanisms for proper planning and resource management will be employed to ensure that there is an equitable distribution of resources within the various industries that comprises the utility sector. The utilities themselves serve every corner of this twin island republic with distinction. Finally, I've ensured that adequate monitoring, evaluation, and project management best practices are utilized to ensure transparency accountability, and value for money in the sector. Madam Speaker, I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to contribute.
Honourable Member for Oropouche West.
Madam Speaker, I crave your kind indulgence to permit me to say words of thanks before I make my general and specific comments on the bill. Madam Speaker, I am a proud citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, my Janma Bhumi and our birthland. I say thanks to both my deceased parents, without whom my contribution here today in Parliament would not have been possible. I also want to thank my teachers at the primary, secondary, and University of the West Indies, and for the thousands of persons of Oropouche West who saw that confidence in me and voted for me so I could represent their needs in this Parliament. And to the leader of the opposition who had the faith and trust in me, I say thanks. And to you, Madam Speaker, for all I learned as your student at Guyadeen Law School, from your good and eminent self, I say thanks. Madam Speaker, we are living in challenging times. The global village is in crisis. When we look at the emerging economies of the world, and we look at Brazil, and we look at Russia, we are seeing these emerging economies are in a recession. When we look at China, we see it's in a state of contraction. We see for the last month, China has devalued its currency 3 times, wiping off at least $3 trillion globally. Madam Speaker, this meant that millions were thrown into poverty and jobs lost. Madam Speaker, in Canada, we are seeing the raw material of prices affecting markets in Africa and globally. So, Madam Speaker, it is farcical and dangerous to blame the People's Partnership Government for the recession in China or for the global financial crash, both of which help explain the decline in oil and gas prices. To blame Kamala or the People's Partnership Government for the state of the world economy is irresponsible, since neither is a function of the forces affecting the world. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance said, and I quote, "Restoring confidence and rebuilding the economy of Trinidad and Tobago will require collective effort of every citizen and the full engagement of those on the other side. I now make a call for all to rally around our program, policies, and our budget. Let's do this together," unquote. Madam Speaker, my parents were children of Hindu immigrants who taught all their children to love and respect every human being. My mother raised an Afro-Trinidadian boy who she called Sonny. She clothed, fed, and protected him. That's how we were nurtured. Love and respect each human being. I must support any call to rally. Rally around Trinidad and Tobago I will not rally around P&M or its old ideas. Madam Speaker, let's do this together is a dangerous slogan. The Bible says, thou shalt not follow a multitude to do evil. And as an opposition MP, I have no mandate to incite people to do this together when this makes no sense, or when this has perverse consequences for citizens, as indeed do many statements put into the record by the Honourable Minister. Therefore, Madam Speaker, I say generally, I am so disappointed by the lack of vision in this minister's presentation. It began as a continuation of campaigning during the election. It ended without exciting the imagination of the youth to expect anything new or different, but only a return to old, tried, tired P&M ideas. And Madam Speaker, without vision, people perish. Madam Speaker, this bill is about raising revenue and spending it to deliver welfare or comfort to the people of Trinidad and Tobago during the year 2015 to 2016. We must not do this together when this has nothing to do with revenue or spending. Madam Speaker, the Minister spoke on crime and national security, but only to criticize the previous government concerning offshore patrol vessels, OPVs. Amidst such constant criticism, the call to rally around the budget is contradictory. It is oxymoronic. It is embedded in a call to partisan rejection of every aspect of the previous People's Partnership government, even as the minister pledges to continue People's Partnerships projects, such as the Prt10 to San Fernando Highway. The call to rally around the budget is incoherent and inconsistent and may be construed as insincere. Yet, Madam Speaker, we will rally around and with the people of Trinidad and Tobago to build a future for our children on a firm foundation of reality, of national unity, Madam Speaker. I repeat it, of national unity, fraternal trust, love, empathy, and support for each other, from Charlottesville to Cedras, including Laventille and Felicity, in a technology-driven, globalized world that ignores physical barriers or ethnic partitions in markets. Madam Speaker, that is the message and the lesson of Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, and of Infosys and of Bill Gates. Madam Speaker, the Minister and the Honourable Prime Minister have a fixation on our maritime borders. They say seal up the borders with patrol boats and we'll all be safe. The Honourable Member for Moruga Tableland spoke and said there is an open border, and he was so thrilled yesterday when he saw so many policemen at the border. Madam Speaker, the Honourable Member for Moruga Tableland clearly does not understand how technology makes a borderless world in the minds of our youth, our white-collar criminals. Madam Speaker, a few days ago, a teenage boy was shot by police in Australia after he had killed a police worker in his school. A week before in the UK, a teenager was sentenced for plotting terrorist murder using the internet. And there is evidence that youth from Trinidad and Tobago are fighting in Syria. Madam Speaker, several young men have been charged for Dana Sitahal's murder, an illustrious tutor of mine also. And at Enterprise, Tobago, Point Fortin, and East Port Spain, children are murdering each other. We have heard nothing to suggest government plans to intervene in the borderless world impacting on the minds of our youth. Madam Speaker, developed countries with huge navies, submarines, frigates, aircraft carriers, long-range patrol aircraft, helicopter landing aircraft, drones, and other apparatus have found it necessary to partner with schools, mosques, and churches to reach youth at risk of criminal behavior or religious radicalization. Madam Speaker, they have not hermetically sealed off their borders from sundry criminal enterprises. Madam Speaker, then I ask, of what use is Joint Patrol Border Agency this government wants to set up? How are they going to set it up? How do you seal your border against money launderers? Madam Speaker, this government cannot do it this way. They know that police and the courts must only be the elements in the fight against different types of crime, or that culture and soft power matter. Madam Speaker, the minister said, and I quote, "Our first priority is to establish an optimal security apparatus. Elements were put in place by the previous PNM government to bolster national security. Equipment systems, secure borders," unquote. Madam Speaker, the language of the new government is stuck in their old paradigm. Security apparatus, equipment, secure borders, arms and ammunition. There is nothing in the budget to indicate how this government is going to improve the detection rate for murder. What has the government put in place for RICO offenses? Madam Speaker, it is knowledge, intelligence, brain power, human capital resources, and institutions that are the key to national security in the modern world of ISIS, FIFA, or children being radicalized to become killers in their bedrooms. Madam Speaker, the language of the budget betrays an old vocabulary of minds stuck in emotions or ideas appropriate to a PNM past. We need to focus on culture, information technology, that ideas are changing hourly, on institutional capability, immigration, customs, quality of education, on national unity, on internal cohesion. Madam Speaker, I said on national unity. Madam Speaker, after the Fukushima nuclear power station disaster in Japan, the world looked on in awe and admiration at the discipline of the Japanese people. Millions peacefully and orderly entered supermarkets and took only what they needed to feed their families. Madam Speaker, national security is about discipline and national unity. It is not only about winning elections. These issues are absent in the language of the budget. They must be the objects of our national imagination, and we must learn quickly from events in our global village. Madam Speaker, we must learn from Mexico or Nigeria or India how culture can defeat the intentions of the Constitution and subvert the rule of law. Madam Speaker, modern national security is not a matter merely of equipment or security apparatus or recreating the Patrick Manning Navy. It is asking why in Jamaica Prime Minister Bruce Golding had to resign after evidence surfaced that he was collaborating with a drug trafficker, or asking why 200 years after independence, narco-traficantes are the real power in Mexico, where the reality is that the rule of law is but a joke, where words in their constitution. Madam Speaker, the draft estimates show that the allocation to national security is just over $10 billion. But we have to ask where these monies are going to fight which crime in which areas. Madam Speaker, the People's Partnership Government adequately provided and provisioned the police with equipment, vehicles, and legislation. New police stations were built, including one at Piaco, and as I speak, the St. Joseph Police Station is being completed. We settled wage negotiations. The statistics show a fall in serious crime. Up until election, the statistics for murder was well below that of 2014. Then, after the night of September 7th, boom. And to the end of September, at least 50 people were murdered. The Honorable Minister of Security and member for Point 14 says, do not politicize crime. Just like the Honorable Minister of Health said, don't politicize foot and mouth disease. Madam Speaker, rubber talk is usual at Carnival, not at budget time. The minister claims $10 million for national security as a great boon. 10 billion, sorry. The most humongous, largest ever for the national security. But the rubber talk cannot survive close scrutiny. It is the result, Madam Speaker, of merging functions and persons from other areas. And it is a reflection of our increases in wages, salaries, and allowances for security officers. The payments for boats and other equipment are people's partnership projects. Few people do not know, Madam Speaker, that 3 + 7 = 10, or that taking $3 billion from other ministries and adding it to $7 billion in the old national security allocation must add to $10 billion. Madam Speaker, only devotees in a cult believe every nonsense their leaders say. And I will...
Madam Speaker, I wish to have your ruling on Standing Order 48-1 in relation to the members' contribution, please.
This is with respect to relevance. I would take it. I would, may I? As far as relevance, my ruling is that the honorable member can continue. This is a budget debate and relevance takes a wider context.
Madam Speaker, thank you so much. The draft estimates show a pattern. Only in the marginal constituencies and North Trinidad will there be new capital investment in fire stations or police stations. We wonder if this government will maintain the magistrate courts in South, Princess Tong, Rio Claro, Mayaro. Let's do this together means a new regime of colonial neglect, rural abandonment, and deliberate division, us, we the in-group versus against them, the out-group. Madam Speaker, I mentioned Japan, saying that their culture of discipline explains crime in that country. There are 125 million Japanese, Madam Speaker. When that country has 5 murders for the year, it is a national scandal. We have less than 1.5 million people here, and where under the PNM administration, more than 500 people were murdered in a year. These facts tell us again that the PNM does not understand that change in culture, much more than their fixation on a blue water navy, explains the fact that we are at least 400 times more murderous than the Japanese, and at least 40 times more murderous than any country in the European Union. Madam Speaker, the Honorable Minister must know about Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's Minister of Enlightenment. He said that if any lie, if said often enough, and if it is big enough, will be believed as the truth. Madam Speaker, this government blames the UNC for youth arrested during a state of emergency in the year 2012. Madam Speaker, the persons arrested were not 3-year or 4-year or 5-year-old. They were all young men born long before 2010. That should focus the mind of the Honorable Minister of National Security, much more than the PNM propaganda blaming the People's Partnership Government. Madam Speaker, it should focus the minister's mind on the statistics on youth gang crimes in some areas of this country, compared to youth crime statistics in places such as Singapore or Finland. Madam Speaker, the estimates are a fact which speaks of the intention not to be an inclusive government, but to remind us of the meaning of words such as spite, vindictiveness, neglect, separation, and abandonment. Madam Speaker, let's do this together means a new regime of colonial neglect, rural abandonment, and deliberate division. They mean us, we in the in-group, or against them, the out-group. It means the 2015 version of the 20th century PNM Imperium, which it boasts, Magnum et prevalibit. Madam Speaker, it will not prevail. The Stalin Empire crashed in 1991 after 74 years of absolute totalitarian hegemony. The German Nazi Empire crashed amidst the ruins in 1945. The British Empire, it was Magnum, but it did not prevail. And so, Madam Speaker, the end of spite and of ethnic chauvinism must come, perhaps sooner, not later. Madam Speaker, the Honorable Minister of National Security must know what Alexander the Great meant by an army of sheep led by a lion will always beat an army of lions led by a sheep. Information technology and knowledge, laptops and phones have liberated the sheep from the PNM misleaders and converted them to lions in every nook and cranny of this country. Like industrial dinosaurs, IBM, BSA, like the Roman Empire, new ideas, new thinking, newer technology have made their dreams of a return to a past obsolete 1 month after victory. Madam Speaker, 21st century national security will not be secured using ideas of 1956, 1961, or 1981. The national in national security means every citizen. That is what explains Japan, Singapore, or the low youth crime rates in European states compared to our record in Trinidad and increasingly in Tobago. Ideas, culture, Madam Speaker, therein lies the answer. Not a mindset stuck in a glorious past of rural neglect. Madam Speaker, the People's Partnership Government had created an information technology culture among children, which must make them immune to the tiresome fluff spewed by the member for Laventy West. His contribution of threats was the opposite of what the Honorable Prime Minister had said, and I quote, "I am not the Prime Minister of PNM," unquote. The budget allocations for national security are inconsistent with that statement, or either the Honorable Prime Minister is insincere. But Madam Speaker, the Honorable Prime Minister is indeed an honorable man. Madam Speaker, we do not appeal to religion for explanation. We do not appeal to the bogus superstition of race or skin color or hair, as the Honorable Member for Laventy West was boasting about his beautiful hair. None of such things have anything to do with youth gangs or crime anywhere in a ghetto. Madam Speaker, it is culture. How you nurture children, that is the matter. It is modernizing thinking or management to increase efficiency or productivity on every aspect of society that explains relatively much lower youth violence or murders in Asia or Europe compared to statistics of PNM constituency in this country. Madam Speaker, ignorant of the neuroscience, the facts stand up here and some boast about their hair or herbal substances. These things may not be symbols, or these things, may be symbols. Symbols, Madam Speaker, of demographics of the jail, but not symbols to incite the youth to wrap their minds around calculus or biochemistry or the human genome. Ideas which go into the most modern cutting-edge crime-fighting police technology. And Madam Speaker, when I look at education, you see the minister quoted, the school curriculum will be modernized to generate young people who understand our history since 1962. Madam Speaker, I will reread this. The school curriculum will be modernized to generate young people who understand our history since 1962. History, Madam Speaker, since 1962. If only we deal with history from 1962, Madam Speaker, what will happen to our first peoples? Their history will be rubbed off. What we learn from history, Madam Speaker, is that some men learn nothing from history. How totalitarians rewrote history to promote their party. Madam Speaker, the Shouter Baptist holiday celebrates the struggle of Bishop Griffith and the Baptists. This resulted in the Legislative Council decision led by the Chief Minister, Albert Gomes, to repeal in May 1951 the 1919 Prohibition Ordinance. This history will not be in the new PNM history book. Our history, according to PNM, began in 1962. Or is it 1956? Madam Speaker, we must not do this to our children. Not individually, not singly, not together, not ever, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Dr. Eric Williams wrote in his book, Inward Hunger, that, and I quote, in 1911, the Hindu immigrants were almost 100% illiterate, unquote. Madam Speaker, before 1956, this was dramatically changed by the colonial government and missionaries. The Mahasabha was already building schools with self-help before 1956. Before 1962, Rudranath Kapildev, Vidia Naipal, Winston Mahabir, and others, children of indentured immigrants, were winning island scholarships. Reginald Dumas, former diplomat and head of the public service, wrote in his autobiography, and I quote, "It was an Indian primary school teacher, Malcolm Sinanan, who whipped me and suffered me and taught me to win one of the few college exhibitions at QRC, and then one of the 4 island scholarships," unquote. Madam Speaker, the new PNM history of Trinidad and Tobago will rub out their story from our history. Madam Speaker, this government is promoting patriotism. We will not do this together. We will mobilize the people to oppose any mimicry of a Stalinist party mentality, rewriting history disguised as patriotism. Madam Speaker, we have studiously defended the independence of the judiciary. Without this, we can have no democracy, no freedom, no liberty. We support the intention of this government to continue our tradition. However, Madam Speaker, we need to repeat that a separation of powers is the foundation of our democratic government. This means an independent judiciary, free from intimidation or fear of the executive. Judges must have the freedom to act impartially, to decide cases only in accordance with the facts and their interpretation of the law. Judges must be free from fear of improper influence. Madam Speaker, in our recent past, we have experienced a Chief Justice being vilified, pilloried, and threatened with arrest by a Prime Minister in this country. Such behavior happens when the executive branch believes and acts as if citizens have no rights.
Madam Speaker, I'm trying to follow the debate. I stand on 48.1, and I would really like to relate it to the budget, but I'm lost. The member for Oropouche West has lost me somewhere. Please.
Again, I rule that in terms of relevance, the member is entitled to continue.
Government tried to lick up our Chief Justice.
Madam Speaker, thank you so much. As I said, such behavior happens when the executive branch believes and acts as if citizens have no rights. It is a totalitarian mentality, as was Nazi Germany or Ghana under Kwame Nkrumah, where the separation of powers was denied. Madam Speaker, we are heartened by the words of the minister concerning the judiciary to give financial autonomy to the judiciary. However, Madam Speaker, words are not deeds, and the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. Madam Speaker, I also am heartened to see that the minister has indicated in his budget with respect to putting CCTV cameras and also teleconferencing for the judiciary. I'm heartened by that. However, the government has only stated it will re-engineer the criminal justice system. But, Madam Speaker, they are silent about the process to deal with it. We must have highly trained and lawful personnel manning these cameras, monitoring our streets throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Our DNA legislation and technology capability must be equal to the best. Such are the matters that must arrest our thinking going forward. Culture change, technology, knowledge-intensive intelligence, smart policing. Madam Speaker, the minister's language is instructive. It says that the budget is dedicated to rebuilding the economy. Madam Speaker, the government has squandered its opportunity to lead our people. The imperative must be to abandon dependency on the energy sector. This demands appropriate language, such as the language in the Imperatives of Adjustment by William Dumas, 1983. And Madam Speaker, if I would now turn to the budget on women, please. Madam Speaker, the budget statement is silent about women, and the boast that they will abolish cash grants to single mothers and single parents. Madam Speaker, I quote an article from the IMF, May 28, 2015, Reigniting Strong and Inclusive Growth in Brazil by Christine Lagarde, Director of the IMF. And I quote, Brazil has made remarkable social gains over the past decade and a half. Millions of families have been lifted from extreme poverty, and access to education and health has improved thanks to a series of well-targeted social interventions, such as Bolsa Familia. The Conditional Cash Transfer Program. This is a great example that has contributed immensely to improving the economic opportunities of the poor people. The stations themselves are also focal points of the efforts aimed at improving the daily lives of the people of Rio de Janeiro. I met several women, that's Lagarde is continuing to speak. I met several women who have become successful entrepreneurs in their own communities with the support of programs aimed at the poor. All their stories were uplifting, and I was impressed, unquote. Madam Speaker, this is not only happening in Brazil, it is also invented in Mexico, and it's first called Progresa, and now is Prospera. It helps poor families to invest in their children's health, nutrition, and education. They build human capital in the most critical stage of the child's life, and so break that vicious cycle of intergenerational transmission of poverty. The Mexican government pays families cash linked to attendance at clinics and in schools. Madam Speaker, the International Food Policy Research has done an empirical analysis of Prospera. It says, and I quote, "The analysis confirms that poor children have increased school enrollment. They get more balanced diets. They receive more medical attention. There are extremely positive impacts on increasing child growth or reduction of stunting. And they are learning that the future can be different from the past. By providing cash transfers, poverty has been reduced in Mexico and long-term improvement in the future of millions," unquote. Madam Speaker, the World Bank reports November 19, 2011, 11 months ago, that more than 50 countries have adopted Bolsa Familia or Prospera types projects. Madam Speaker, I heard the word travesty when this budget statement was read on Monday afternoon. It was inopposite then. Travesty is indeed now to deny poor mothers the cash support they need to give their babies' brains better nutrition in the critical time from conception to 3 years, and the healthcare equity demands if we care. Perhaps this government is no longer care to know that poor nutrition and poor health are positively linked to bullying, deviant or criminal behavior, and to long-term poverty. This is a scientific fact, Madam Speaker. This is not my opinion. Madam Speaker, as I continue with respect to women, which is highlighted in the budget and it also silent in the budget, we see that women are at least half of our population, and we are in daily danger. It is a legacy of our patriarchal culture. The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. Our future depends on the way we protect women and help create less stress for them. Have we done enough with safe houses or counseling for the daily bruising, battering, wounding, chopping, and too often killing of our women? Madam Speaker, it is not only about equity or equal pay for women. We have a serious culture problem with abuse of women and their children. Madam Speaker, I make an urgent appeal to the Honorable Minister to reconsider the flippant or the capricious manner they seem to dismiss financing programs involving women. Not a word in the speech, silence. In this context, Madam Speaker, I appeal to the Honorable Minister to give priority, the Minister of Health, to give priority to the staffing of the Children's Hospital and the resources for the Children's Life Fund. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance and every speaker on the government side must be reading out of 1984, Orwell's masterpiece. In that book, Madam Speaker, a word means anything the party says the word means. They say, the government says us, and let us do this together, and us means us with the government. Madam Speaker, us in standard English, as used in the budget, must include the people of my constituency, Oropouche West. I heard the member for Laventille East, Mova, tell us he already knows he will be getting a swimming pool. the honorable member talk about other things the minister promised to give him. The minister for Laventille West, he says he and the Prime Minister are already outlining where infrastructure is to be built. Madam Speaker, when we look at the budget statement, there are 2 paragraphs, 11 lines in the budget about rural development.
West, your 45 minutes are all spent. You're entitled to 10 more minutes, during which I'll expect you to wrap up your contribution.
I'm grateful, please. Madam Speaker, I will reiterate. There are 2 paragraphs, 11 lines in the budget about rural development. And no promise or no development for rural Oropouche West. Madam Speaker, English is a language the persons and people in Oropouche West speak. In Oropouche West, no daily communication is done in Bhojpuri, Urdu, Arabic, or Hindi. The villagers, they are alarmed at us, as stated by the other side, does not include citizens of Oropouche West. They thought that when the Honorable Minister said us, as in, let us do this together, he meant all of us, including Oropouche West. There is a mindset, Madam Speaker, on display on the other side. The Minister of Works, his metaphors tell us of a mindset wallowing in an in-group versus out-group, or us, PNM, against their mindset. Madam Speaker, the election is over. It is done. We will build this country together, or a house divided against itself cannot stand.
That's it.
Madam Speaker, it must be transparent that the members on the opposite side have learned nothing from the People's Partnership Government investing in the Prt10 to San Fernando Highway, the Valencia bypass, the modernization of the road networks in southern areas, which were abandoned since colonial times. If we, all of us, are to progress, we must abandon that mindset. In that worldview which sees the state of Trinidad and Tobago as an arena for ethnic or communal political preferment, lies trouble, Madam Speaker. The Honorable Minister of Finance has promised nothing for the people of Oropouche West. Madam Speaker, as I saw again in the budget statement, the last of the 12 lines on the budget on rural development proclaims, and I quote, local government will have a dedicated source of funding after October 2016, and that is, if the government completes its reform process by October 2016, unquote. Apparently, Madam Speaker, there would not be any rural development to take place in Oropouche before 2017. Madam Speaker, when we look at the allocation under the Ministry of Agriculture, we see that the Ministry of Agriculture gets less than $1 billion, most of which will be used for recurrent expenditure. Where from will come the capital for rural development? Or is it that we return to an era of anti-South Trinidad, anti-rural areas that has characterized the entire history of this government that ruled since 1956? Madam Speaker, under the People's Partnership Government, the people of Oropouche West got water religiously every day. Madam Speaker, 1 week after elections, the people cannot get water. Every day, persons are complaining, they're calling. Madam Speaker, it's my duty to ensure that the needs of my constituents are fulfilled. and I will do everything in my power to ensure that it happens. We demand, Madam Speaker, that us must include us, the people of Oropouche West. I demand that the Minister of Finance treat me as he has treated a member of the Laventille East mover. Let us have a discussion, let us have a discussion next week on the list of projects we can do in Oropouche West now, so that both the people in Laventille and Oropouche West can nestle in the lap of luxury. Madam Speaker, the language of this budget is passé. It is staid, uninspiring, and without vision. The minister ensured that the language must lock our minds into parochial thinking, into vulgar stereotyping, as in the crosstalk from the other side. Madam Speaker, we needed a budget to unite and lift the national spirit. Madam Speaker, we needed a budget to unite and lift the national spirit, all of Trinidad and Tobago. Such a budget was not delivered. I thank you.
Honorable Member for Arima.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of my distinguished colleagues, and as I present my contribution to this debate on Fiscal 2016, I would like, first of all, to focus very briefly on some comments made by the member for Oropouche West. Madam Speaker, running through her entire contribution, in fact, it was a similar thread, was her statement that our slogan, "Let's do this together," is a dangerous slogan, is a regime of the colonial neglect that we suffered in the past, and it is deliberate diversion. Imagine that. Madam Chairman, I am a teacher. I consider myself still a teacher. In my days in the classroom, if or whenever I found an errant student, I would send that student to detention. Madam Chairman, I don't have the authority, Madam Speaker, I don't have the authority to send Oropouche West to detention, but I must say that here is a person who does not know what she speaks of. Madam Speaker, I would suggest that the member for Oropouche West remains in an area where I'm sure she is more comfortable than in delving in areas where she is uncomfortable. For example, her statement on history. Madam Chairman, Madam Speaker, our Prime Minister, in one of his earlier statements to me, gave me the responsibility of ensuring that I embark on a level of curriculum reform in our school system to ensure that the teaching of the history of Trinidad and Tobago is included. By the comments from Oropouche West, it convinces me, Madam Speaker, that she knows nothing about the history of Trinidad and Tobago. It is an effort of the past regime to rewrite the history of Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore, I want to assure you, Madam Speaker, that we are going to put things right. We are going to make sure that the truth is recorded for posterity. Madam Speaker, when the member for Oropouche West speaks about our slogan as being divisive, deliberate division, I want to draw her attention to the words of our national anthem. Side by side we stand, islands of the blue Caribbean Sea. This speaks volumes about the need for us to stand together. But more so, Madam Speaker, I want to remind her of the watchwords of this country. Together we aspire, together we achieve. And certainly, our slogan speaks eloquently to our national anthem and our watchwords. Enough said, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wish to congratulate my colleague, Minister of Finance, Mr. Caroni, on his maiden budget presentation. Thank you, sir. Thank you. At the same time, I say thanks to our Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley, and certainly it feels good to say that, for affording me, you remember, previously he left these chambers under suspension and returned triumphantly as the Prime Minister of Trinidad. And I want to thank him for affording me the opportunity to serve at this level. Madam Speaker, I also take the opportunity to thank you and to show my appreciation to you for the way you have been handling this debate so far. Madam Speaker, our budget presentation is predicated upon an understanding of the needs of the citizens of this country, young and old. It is tempered with the realities of our financial situation. Against this backdrop, we seek to overlay a new code of conduct based on the general principles of integrity, selflessness, objectivity, accountability, honesty, openness, and leadership. These values will form a thread which pervades all of our endeavors in the next year, and indeed for the duration of our term in office. Madam Speaker, this government is and has been committed to the development of our human resource, from early childhood to tertiary level. In this regard, our manifesto indicates the significance placed on education as the vehicle for national development from 1956 to the present day. Madam Speaker, it is with a sense both of history, and let me repeat, it is a sense both of history and a burgeoning expectation that I embark upon this newest phase of my service to Trinidad and Tobago in the education sector. A lot has been said over the past few months about the education sector. On my assumption of duties, I found a Ministry of Education where employees were totally demotivated, alienated, disempowered, and emotionally traumatized. Madam Speaker, advice from technical officers was thrown out of the window, and employees in various units and the divisions, including human resources, curriculum, and the school supervision, have been asked to work in less than satisfactory conditions. My fellow minister this morning spoke of the inhumane conditions under which the Ministry of Education employees are forced to work. Many stakeholders, Madam Speaker, have indicated their interaction with the ministry has been less than satisfactory, and some, including tutor, the Principals Associations and the National Parent Teachers Association have stated at meetings with me that they were banned from having meetings with the ministry. Madam Speaker, I'm sure you will agree that this state of affairs is untenable, and it is a matter which I intend to address. In this regard, Madam Speaker, I would like to thank the permanent secretaries and the other dedicated and committed ministry officials for their unstinting support. Madam Speaker, my government is pleased to lay emphasis on education in the following areas: governance and administration, access to education, curriculum development, and educational service delivery. Madam Speaker, my government is committed to the development of an education sector which adequately serves all of its publics and mirrors the education system of the highest performing nations worldwide. In this regard, a main focus of this government will be the development of an administrative framework for the education sector. Madam Speaker, unlike our predecessors, we will ensure that we develop a holistic plan for education, which will be grounded in a national policy framework. We will undertake a strategic review of the ministry, ensuring that our strategic direction is clearly defined and that measures are in place for close monitoring and effectiveness and efficiency. This will also facilitate a symbiotic relationship between and among all levels of the education system. Madam Speaker, this means that challenges faced by the Ministry of Education in ensuring that tertiary institutions produce graduates with the skill sets necessary to facilitate the curricula at the early childhood, primary, and the secondary levels will become a thing of the past. Further, secondary education graduates will arrive at the tertiary institutions well equipped for the experience. Madam Speaker, in seeking to ensure that we are fully equipped to cater to the needs of our students at all levels, the ministry itself must adapt to the needs of the 21st century learner. Over the past few years, attempts at restructuring the Ministry of Education have only tackled the area of school supervision. That's the only area. There is a dire need to take a serious look at both the school supervision and the management division. This will serve to restore the vertical path of mobility within the division. It will serve to strengthen the management of the operations of schools. It will serve to provide support for school-based management, and it will serve to facilitate the implementation of education development plans and facilitate communication between head office and schools. We recognize that there is need for a holistic approach to the restructuring process. In this regard, Madam Speaker, our government will seek to ensure that the restructuring and the realignment process will involve the ministry in its entirety, including tertiary education, skills training, and the science and technology, to ensure that business processes and the management systems are significantly improved, and that the needs of all stakeholders, internal and external, are effectively and efficiently met. One essential enabler for a world-class education system that we wish to develop is the relevant legislation. In an effort to improve governance of the education system, amendments to the current legislation, that is the Education Act 3901 of 1966, that began during our last term in office. My understanding is that little progress was made in this area over the past 5 years, in spite of the fact that a consultant was hired to develop a draft policy. The relevant draft policy is still being framed. Madam Speaker, we recognize that there is need for an Education Act that facilitates the harmonious rationalization and the modernization of the education system, including the tertiary education sector, which is not currently in the Act. We will therefore seek to ensure the completion of this legislative review process and the finalization and the implementation of the much needed amendments, and including the inclusion of the tertiary education sector in the Education Act. Madam Speaker, the People's National Movement's Manifesto 2015 highlighted the need to foster, develop, and encourage best practices in the administration of the education system. One area of concern identified within the ministry is the need to significantly improve the leadership and the management. As such, it is proposed that the Ministry of Education focuses on a school-based management approach. Such a model will meet the needs of our education system and help to improve student output, as well as increasing accountability. The proposed SBM model is a structured and a targeted framework that defines the expectations of principals and their leadership teams and targets those areas for consideration identified in the research on effective schools. It will also facilitate the development of a strategic plan and the implementation of school development action plans. In moving forward, Madam Speaker, this government proposes to put into operation the school-based management system and the leadership training at primary and secondary levels, both in Trinidad and Tobago. This will ensure a uniform approach to school management and the development of a system through which school performance can be benchmarked against standards set. We will ensure that this system moves beyond talk to full implementation. Madam Speaker, we intend to develop and encourage a culture of research throughout the education system. The strategic research agenda of the Ministry of Education will now be reviewed to ensure an alignment of research that will guide policy and decision-making, using the expertise of both tertiary education and the science and the technology sectors. Our ministry, the Ministry of Education, is committed to stakeholder engagement, whereby we will foster communication and a collaborative approach between the Ministry of Education and its stakeholders. Stakeholders should and will be given the opportunity to lend their knowledge, abilities, and experience in the development of an enhanced and strengthened educational system. One of our roles is to ensure that there is a nexus between the needs of the business community and the skill sets of graduates. It is a requisite that a reciprocal relationship exists with our stakeholders, such as other ministries, agencies, private sector, other community members, and the wider community. The Ministry of Education recognizes that there is much to be done to solidify stakeholder engagement. This is a critical part of our mission for redefining the Ministry of Education and its services offered to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Chairman, Madam Speaker, I now turn to access to education. One area that I bring to the attention of this Honorable House is the issue of construction and repairs to schools. The Education Facilities Company Limited, EFCL, was established to manage the construction and the repair program of the ministry. Madam Speaker, everywhere I have visited, I have been faced with a recurring theme of construction delays, inflated costs, and poor quality work. In fact, we continue to be faced with the perennial problem of incomplete repairs and the closure of schools. Madam Speaker, just to give an example, North Oropouche Government Primary School was closed since March the 17th this year. I think this needs repeating. The North Oropouche Government Primary School was closed since March the 17th, 2005. Madam Speaker, this is nothing less than a criminal act. To have students out of school for such an extended time. Madam Speaker, it was only with the intervention of this minister that arrangements were made for students to attend classes at an alternative venue. Thank God for the People's National Movement. Repairs to the school will be completed shortly.
Can the member give way, please?
Certainly.
Yeah,
you are my friend, remember that.
Thank you. Member. Just for a point of clarification, are you saying that the students were out of school from 2005 to now? I mean, I'm just asking for my own interest.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No, 2015, March 17th, 2015, that's what I said. March the 15th, March the 17th, 2015.
March to October. He said 15 first and then 5 up.
And I only gave way because, you know, we have a connection between both of us, you know that.
Talk to the Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Members, please.
The member for Barataria Service interrupted me, Madam Speaker. I ask for your protection. Madam Speaker, we were also faced with the spectacle of the ceremonial opening of schools prior to the general elections, even with students in attendance during the school vacation. Madam Speaker, one would expect a school that is officially opened to be ready for occupancy. This was not so in many cases. In fact, just to give an example, at Five Rivers Secondary School, the principal and staff were asked to organize to move to the new school at the beginning of this term. However, Madam Speaker, this school remained closed up until a week ago due to a long list of woes, including, but not limited to, no water connection, no sewer connection, no furniture, and non-functioning air condition. Yet, during the vacation period, this school was officially opened. Again, Madam Speaker, because of my intervention, the school was able to be reopened. I drink to that water. In another instance, Madam Speaker, it is interesting to note that a primary school had an entire floor added without any approval or discussions with the Ministry of Education. Madam Speaker, these are not isolated incidents. This arbitrary approach to construction and repairs has resulted in the administration being saddled with the sum of $600 million currently being owed to contractors. Every day, I am being faced with information that has convinced me that the EFCL was a runaway horse, doing whatever it wanted without consulting with the Ministry of Education. Madam Speaker, contractors have told me that in many instances, they were told that their bids were too small and they need to jack it up. Too small. Contractors told me, Madam Speaker, that when they submitted their bills, they were told that their bills were too small and that they should jack it up. I have been told that certain high officials demanded their cut. Yeah. Madam Speaker, what I am certain of is that contractors have been coming to my home complaining that they have not been paid for work done. Madam Speaker, this is a matter that the new board of EFCL will have to address immediately. I am sure the newly appointed board of the EFCL will investigate and audit this company. I turn to early childhood care and education, ECCE. Madam Speaker, in order to cater for our ever-growing population, as well as children in disadvantaged areas, the ECCE construction program was enhanced. Madam Speaker, I am being disturbed.
Could members please observe the standing orders? There are specific orders with respect to interruptions, and we are also guided by the standing orders that there should not be excessive crosstalk. Could the Honourable Member of Arima please continue?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, my predecessors have indicated that a large number of centers have been built over the past 5 years. Indeed, for fiscal 2015, a total of $167.075 million was expended on ECC centers, while another $51.665 million was expended on repairs to ECC centers. Further, another $13 million was spent on supervision of construction. $9 million on outfitting the ECC centers, and the $27.675 million was expended on the purchase of places from private providers. Madam Speaker, for the over $278 million spent in the past year of frenzied spending at this level, what is the quality of work done? I ask that question. What is the quality of the work that has been done? As I indicated before, the centers completed are characterized by shoddy workmanship. Numerous defects are found upon occupation, and the physical issues exist which render the centers unable to operate at optimal levels. With respect to the IDB loan program for the construction of 50 ECC centers, of which 27 centers have already been constructed, this government proposes to continue with the construction of the remaining 26. I give that assurance. We will, however, seek to maximize value for money. We will ensure that the centers are built where they are needed. This government will serve all our clients. We will ensure that the tendering procedures for building contractors are open and above board. Madam Speaker, this government will ensure that the highest standards of safety are met during construction, that centers are built to design, and that adequate numbers of qualified staff are placed at the centers upon completion. In order to continue universal ECC and to ensure the provision of quality ECC services, private centers that do not meet the ministry standards must not be neglected. These centers will continue to be provided with curriculum support and guidance, quality standard support, and the family and administrative support when necessary. In turn, this should enable them to meet the standards set by the Ministry of Education. Madam Speaker, in addition, we will conduct a census on the ECCE sector. This will facilitate the creation of an improved database of all public and private ECC centers to be able to effectively monitor the adherence to government standards. Further, progressive training programs for teacher development in both public and the private ECC centers will continue to ensure effective delivery of the national ECCE curriculum. This is to be done with the explicit focus on the seamless transition from ECC level to the primary level and ensure linkages between the curricula at these levels. We move on to primary infrastructure. Madam Speaker, having worked in the primary sector for a number of years, I am well aware of the infrastructural needs at this level. It must be noted that approximately 60% of primary schools are over 50 years old and, as a result, need to be renovated, upgraded, modernized, and the new schools constructed where necessary. Madam Speaker, the information I have is that 26 primary schools are under construction and are at various stages of completion. For the fiscal year 2014-2015, the sum expended on infrastructure for primary schools was $340.9 million. This can be further broken down as follows: $218.56 million for construction, $106.76 million for improvement and refurbishment and extensions to primary schools, and $15.6 million for procurement of furniture and equipment. Again, we see a pattern of high levels of spending, but have we gotten value for money? Madam Speaker, no longer will the prioritization of schools for construction be done on a whim and fancy. Madam Speaker, the former administration has boasted that they have been able to build 100 new schools. At the very first meeting I had with the EFCL, I asked the management of EFCL to provide me with a list of the 100 schools that have been constructed. Up to this point, that company has been unable to provide me with that list.
It's on the website.
In the rationalization of the schools to be replaced, the following will be considered. The following will be considered: geographical demographics of the area and the neighboring areas, population projections, as well as the necessity of a replacement school. Secondary infrastructure. Madam Speaker, when we demitted office in 2010, a total of 12 secondary schools were under construction. When this government demitted office in 2010, a total of 12 secondary schools were under construction. Of these, 5 are still under construction in 2015. Madam Speaker, please allow me to inform this nation that a concerted effort will be made for the next fiscal year to complete the construction of the following junior secondary schools, wherein works commenced in the fiscal year 2007 to 2008. These are Baltare North Secondary, Kaipichaima West Secondary, Mount Hope Secondary, Siparia East Secondary, and St. Joseph Secondary. Poverty Girls and Shiva Boys Hindu Colleges, where construction commenced in fiscal 2012-2013, are also expected to be completed in the next fiscal year. We will make sure that all these schools are completed in this fiscal year. I would like you to note, Madam Speaker, that for the fiscal year 2014-2015, the sum expended on infrastructure for secondary schools was $254.18 million, consisting of $153.8 million for construction, $10.65 million for furniture and equipment, and $89.7 million for improvement, refurbishment, and extension to secondary schools. A focus on cost savings will also be critical in going forward with the construction and refurbishing of secondary schools. Madam Chairman, repairs and maintenance of schools are also other areas where we plan to focus on cost efficiency. This program will be characterized by transparency in tendering, close partnership with stakeholders to minimize loss of school time, and a collaborative relationship with the new EFCL board to ensure value for money. Madam Speaker, our staff members who are responsible for managing the education of our students continue to be housed in premises that are unsafe. In this regard, efforts will be made to ensure that the staff have safe, sanitary, comfortable, and conducive environments to perform their duties. I turn to scholarships. The provision of scholarships, including those based on the Caribbean Advanced Proficiency Examination, has been based on the recognition of excellence in students' performance, in addition to supporting the human capital needs of our country. We have been faced with the perennial problem of recipients of scholarships on completion of their studies being unable to obtain employment both in the public and private sectors. Madam Speaker, while this government is committed to the recognition of excellence and access to tertiary education, we propose to review the system of scholarships to ensure there is alignment with the human capital needs of our country. And for the information of this House, recipients of scholarships based on the 2015 CAPE examination will know their fate later this week. An announcement will be made shortly about those persons who are in receipt of scholarships. Tertiary education. Madam Speaker, my government is committed to preserving, maintaining, and expanding where necessary our system of free education and the training at all levels. This government remains committed to the expansion of the tertiary sector in Trinidad and Tobago. We will ensure that tertiary education is accessible to citizens irrespective of their geographical location. In this regard, we will continue the following initiatives which we had started during our last term in office. The University of Trinidad and Tobago's Aviation Campus in Camden, Couva, to provide training in aviation. Our citizens will no longer have to leave Trinidad and Tobago to access training in this field. The COSTAT main campus in Shogunas, operations are expected to commence at this campus in January 2016. Phase 1 construction works for the open campus site of the University of the West Indies in Shogunas will commence in fiscal 16 as planned. Work on the Academy of Nursing and Allied Health at El Dorado will continue. This government will ensure that these initiatives will continue. A government that cares for all. Madam Speaker, in addition to this, the following programs will be expanded. Nursing programs offered by the Nursing Education Division of COSTAT and the School of Nursing of the University of the West Indies. We will continue to increase the supply of locally trained nurses and allied staff. I was in conversation with a very high official of the Ministry of Health, one of the doctors who operate at the Mount Hope facility. And he was high in praise of the nurses who graduate under this program, an initiative of the People's National Movement government. What did you say? Oh, thank you. The dentistry school at UWI's Facility of Medical Sciences will be continued. Training of medical students at San Fernando. The Point Lisa's Industrial Apprenticeship Program will be encouraged and expanded. The integrated training facility at Woodford Lodge, shared by NESC, YTEP, and MIC-IT, will be expanded to include additional buildings for skills training in the culinary arts and the welding and fabrication inter alia. MIC's campuses in Diego Martin, Omera, and Tobago will be enhanced and expanded, and training for the energy sector, such as the Julian Academy in St. Madeleine and the Skills and Technology Center in Pinal, will continue to be a priority. This is our caring government. With the amalgamation of the portfolios of tertiary education, science and technology, and the Ministry of Education, it is the intention of our government to provide a seamless system of education from ECCE to tertiary education. At present, the GATE program provides assistance towards the cost of tuition fees for eligible students, pursuing approved tertiary level programs at local and regional public and private institutions. Madam Speaker, approximately $650 million was spent on GATE in the last fiscal year.
Honorable Member for Arima, your speaking time has expired. You're entitled to 10 more minutes, and I'd ask you to wrap up within those 10 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. This government will work diligently to provide the support systems necessary for the effective implementation of the curricula at various levels. We will ensure that staffing, relevant training, and information communications technology are provided at levels that are sufficient to meet our needs and to take us through the 21st century. Madam Speaker, I need to address some comments to the people of Arima who have made it possible for my being here. It would be remiss of me not to include my constituents, the people of Arima, who have reposed their trust in me, electing me as their Member of Parliament with the highest number of votes in the history of Arima. Arima is a gem in the crown of Trinidad and Tobago. Its history is linked with our first people, who are, I might add, currently celebrating their culture and tradition at the Omera campus of the University of the West of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, it is with great confidence that I look forward to the continuous development and upgrade of the urban areas of Arima, alongside rural development of our villages. Our esteemed Finance Minister, the Honorable Colin Imbert, MP for Diego Martin East, and our Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Keith Rowley, and many others have similar challenges as we have in our constituency. Our communities are situated around internal rivers and coastal communities. We have bustling, congested business areas, as well as malls that service the wider residential areas. And we have our agricultural farms with great potential, managed by families with commitment to produce and contribute to our agriculture and agro-processing sector. The strategic approach of our administration will leave no one behind. Arima will play a big part in our new focus on the teaching of the history of Trinidad and Tobago. We will integrate the focus of history with our enhanced curriculum. And as mentioned earlier in my presentation, Arima will help save our history from creative texts that have effaced and reconstructed the history of our people over time. Our finance minister laid in this House a broad-based suite of detailed policy, programs and measures that will lift not only Arima with its 26,681 residents out of the lethargy that has been created by the last administration, but will also put Trinidad and Tobago on a path to growth, development, social peace, economic stability, and transformation. A place where all citizens will get their fair share of national resources and receive good, honest, equitable, and transparent governance and government. In closing, Madam Speaker, I would like to once again thank the permanent secretaries, Chief Education Officer, and other staff of the Ministry of Education for their support. This administration is mindful of the various challenges confronting us and the need to engage all our publics as we embark on the road ahead. I wish to signal to our stakeholders in education, both internal and external, that we have entered an era of temperance, impartiality, rational decision-making, transparency, humility, consultation, and collaboration. To the people of Arima, keep the faith. Better days are ahead. Let us do this together. I thank you.
Honourable Member for Caroni East.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I rise to make my first contribution in this first session of the 11th Parliament, let me first of all indicate my sincerest thanks to my former Prime Minister and political leader and the leader of the opposition for her confidence in my continuing to be the Member of Parliament to have contested for Caroni East. And I want to say thanks, the sincerest thanks to my constituents who have elected me for the third time in this, having elected me to the 9th, 10th, and now the 11th Parliament. Let me congratulate and congratulate all those who have been elected for the first time on the government side and my colleagues on the opposition side here. And it's nice to see some of the familiar faces from the old Parliament back with us, and I'm very happy to be back with the team. Madam Speaker, let me say sincerest congratulations to you as well on your position as being the Speaker of this House. And I would remember working with you in the other place in the Senate, in the 8th Parliament around 2004, 2005, when you were the Attorney General at that time. Madam Speaker, I want to congratulate my successor in the Ministry of Education and to wish him very well, a friend and colleague who I have known for a long time, since the 1990s, when we served together as colleagues in the National Advisory Committee on Education around 1997, when he was the tutor representative and I was the deputy chair of the National Advisory Committee on Education, serving then for a while under Minister Nanan and then my Honourable Prime Minister when she was Minister of Education. I'm very heartened to hear the policies of continuation of a number of programs that we started in the education sector. And I wish you well in the continuation of these. But there are a number of things that I need to respond to as when you made your statements.
The member.
Yes, the member for Arima. it is important for me to give to this House some of the areas of accomplishments which we had been able to make during our 5-year period. And I took the baton from my political leader when she was Minister of Education. And when we went into the Ministry of Education in 2010, we first asked the question, what do we want for the education for our children? What do we want as a value outcome? And when we looked at the world literature as well, it was very deficient in terms of telling us where we needed to go. So we searched the shelves of the Ministry of Education. We looked for all the action task forces and the reports, and we were able to come up with a business development report, which 6 months later, in December 2010, formed the basis for our movement forward in the education sector. We were then able to bring out a strategic plan, 2011-2015, and that plan, strategic plan, became the bedrock for the movement and the continuation of the education sector until we demitted office a few weeks ago. And we have been able to carry Trinidad and Tobago, honorable member and members, toward the world stage of education. So we now being considered Trinidad and Tobago as a world leader in education. I know your hands will be full, and that's why I wish you success with your colleague, your minister, in the Ministry of Education, the Member of Parliament for Moruga Tableland. So we now, as a world leader in education, and we are there with the rest of the developed countries, South Korea, Japan, Singapore, Finland. They are no way ahead of us as far as our education sector is concerned. In fact, the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, when he addressed the Commonwealth, the Caribbean, the CARICOM ministers, prime ministers meeting two or three months ago, he mentioned that Trinidad and Tobago is the first country in the world to have achieved universal early childhood education. And that is no easy, phenomenal feat. And for us, as a small country of 1.3 million people, to have achieved universal early childhood education, meaning that no child aged 3 and 4 before moving to primary school will be left out of an education system. So now Trinidad and Tobago is poised, and honorable member for Arima, we have handed over to you a situation where we have universal early childhood education, universal primary education, universal secondary education, and universal tertiary education up to the undergraduate level and up to the first degree. Free. They're all free. They're all free. My honorable Prime Minister at the time, and when she was Minister of Education, was able to achieve between 1997 to 2001 the question of universal secondary education. You will remember that from 1962 or 1956 to 2000, almost 44 years, all children who wrote examinations from the primary school were not able to get a place in a primary school. So every year, 7,000 to 10,000 students were left out of place in secondary school, and multiply that for 30 years, we have in Trinidad and Tobago now approximately 250,000 citizens of this country who unfortunately were not able to grasp a good secondary education because there was no place. And in the 95 to 2001 program, my former Prime Minister ensured that she brought out universal secondary education so that all children will be able to achieve a secondary education and will not be left behind. Yes. And it was on my Prime Minister's constant monitoring of my performance as we went along. She said to me as Minister, please ensure that we achieve universal early childhood education. And I had the pleasure to indicate that by the beginning of 2015, we had achieved that feat. So we have now 36,000 children aged 3 and 4 who are able to have a place in an early childhood education school across Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, there are some parents who still want to pay for their children to go to some early childhood education centers, as well as we have a number of parents who want to pay for private primary schools and private secondary schools, of which we have 18 private secondary schools and 76 private primary schools. And so, Madam Speaker, with this movement forward in the education sector, we looked at 16 different areas, and the Honorable Prime Minister indicated from the beginning that we were going to give laptops to students. And we had to work assiduously in the first year to make sure that close to 19,000 students received their laptops. And over the last 5 years, we have given close to about 95,000 students laptops who entered from primary school into secondary school. And not only that, we gave close to about 6,000 teachers, secondary school teachers and principals and school supervisors laptops as well, so that they became an integral part of the infusion of the curriculum with ICT in the school system. We also ensured that all secondary schools have computer labs, and some of the schools have computer labs, one computer lab to 6 computer labs, and some labs have 60 computers. And we had over 360 primary schools with computer labs. In addition to that, we have over 150 ICT technicians servicing these computer labs. And each one of the secondary schools now as well has an audiovisual classroom where we have multimedia projectors, interactive whiteboards, and we have teachers dedicated towards ensuring that there is infusion of ICT with the curriculum. Thousands of teachers have been trained with ICT in curriculum, that some of our teachers have been winning Microsoft prizes around the world as global leaders in ICT in education. We became the leader in the Caribbean and Latin America for ICT. And we had a conference hosted here about 2 years ago where the Organization of American States and the IDB saw it necessary to bring Trinidad as a leader for ICT in education. We also have about 25 schools with 21st century smart classrooms. So we are leaders with ICT in education. And therefore, when we demitted office, we were expecting that the students who would have gone on to secondary school would have received their laptops by now. And so, Honorable Minister of Education, I want to pose the question to you to ask whether these students who are now in Form 1 in the secondary schools will in fact be receiving their laptops at all. You need to tell them because the expectation is there. If we were continuing, we would have ensured that they received their laptops. So that was 1, ICT in education. 2, the special needs education. We began to ensure that the 25 schools that we have with special needs education, 11 private and 14 government early child special needs schools, was taking care of about 2,000 students with special needs education. This is an area, Honorable Minister, I'd like to recommend for your thinking and for your consideration so that these students with either dyslexia, autism, or ADHD, or emotional or behavioral or psychological abnormalities, or Down syndrome or cerebral palsy could be mainstreamed in the education sector with an inclusive education model. Then we ensured that we made sure that we achieved the universal early childhood education. Then the 4th area was infrastructure in schools. Let me just deal with that for a moment. And I want to, first of all, congratulate and thank the 22,000 Ministry of Education employees who I had the opportunity and the privilege to work with over the last 5 years, and the 474 principals of primary schools and the 134 principals of the secondary schools, and my colleague in Tobago, Mr. Huey Cadet, the Secretary of Education and Sports. I want to thank all the school supervisors, the 16,000 teachers, 8,500 and about 8,000 in the primary schools and 8,000 in the secondary schools, and the close to 1,000 teachers now in the early childhood education centers. I also want to thank the various stakeholders who the minister indicated that we did not have, I was not consulting with them, But whoever gave you that information, Honorable Minister, has given you false information, because we have at least 18 stakeholders from different denominational boards: the Anglicans, the Catholics, the Mahasabha, the Presbyterians, the Moravian, the Pentecostal, the Seventh-day Adventists, and so on, the TIA, TML, and the ASTRA board, and so on. Then we met on numerous occasions with tutor, almost once per term, and we met on numerous occasions with the NPTA. At least there were times when we agreed to disagree. I might not have agreed with them in some of the ways that we wanted to move forward, but there was an agreement to disagree on numerous occasions. Then we had other stakeholders of the principals of the Primary Schools Association, the Secondary Schools Association, and also the special needs education principals. So there was massive consultation all around. Then we had a major consultation, how we are moving the curriculum forward. That was one of our goals as well. And members of the House and members listening, we engaged the national community in the first year in our consultation on the primary school curriculum. And there were thousands of participants who ensured that we looked at carefully at the curriculum. At the end of it all, there was a reform of the primary school curriculum where we brought in, for the first time, morals, values, ethics, citizenry development, character development in the education sector. We brought in agri-science, health and family life education, which included some amount of sex education, agri-science, etc., and visual and performing arts and physical education. We ensured that we brought in the continuous assessment program, where 30% of the marks is now given to students who, on a continuous assessment, are given marks in Standard 4 and Standard 5, and 70% is given for the final year in language arts and mathematics. So we have been able to restructure the primary school curriculum. Now the secondary school curriculum, we had a year and a half of doing that, and we completed that recently, and we had decided with the Chief Education Officer, and he ensured that at the beginning of this school term, that science was going to be a very important part of the curriculum to ensure that biology, physics, and chemistry become integral part in Form 1. And Honorable Minister, the same history that you want to bring in, we said that history and geography will be taught from January. It is for you to check to see whether that is being done now in the secondary schools. In addition, we reviewed the early childhood education curriculum. We had some of the best brains. The previous administration between 2002 to 2010 had done a lot of work on the early childhood education curriculum. We took it up from there and we had to tweak it a bit. And Trinidad and Tobago has one of the best curriculum for early childhood education, and recognized globally why the now presidential candidate, Democratic presidential candidate, Mrs. Hillary Clinton, at a meeting with the IADB and OS in Washington about 2 years ago, complimented Trinidad and Tobago on its work in early childhood education and inclusive education model that we were using. In fact, her foundation, the Clinton Foundation, the watchwords are too small to fail. And so she was very complimentary to our work in the education sector and early childhood education. So I looked at your manifesto, and I realized that most of the things that you said in your manifesto, we have in fact already done, Honorable Minister. And I want to ask you all to review what you put on your manifesto and examine it in detail. Let me just give you some of the things you said. In the 2002 to 2010 period, we increased the participation rate in tertiary education by over 400%. My honorable colleague, Minister, the MP for Chaguanas East, will tell you that when you debuted the office in 2010, your participation rate in tertiary education was 42%. Now it's 65% and above. The honorable member was
No, that was a dream.
You said that you will preserve, maintain, and expand when necessary our system of free education and training at all levels. It's already free. Education is already free, as I said, from early childhood to university level. It's already free. Ensure that the government assistance for GATE system, which we created in 2004, remains relevant, easily accessible, and available to all citizens who need it. We have already done that. We have GATE going on for the last 5 years. So what is new in your manifesto? But what is new, it would seem, that you have decided that you're going to go with a means test on the GATE program. I advise you that this is a very dangerous thing that you're going to do. You're going to bring out inequity in education, lack of accessibility.
Could you kindly address your comments to the Speaker? And when you refer to another member, it is honorable member.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I should have more experience to address you at the chair. Honorable member and Honorable Minister of Education, you need to clarify to the country, if it is not in the manifesto here, we heard that there is a statement emanating from the other side about the GATE program on the budget statement, and we need to have some clarification whether there is going to be a means test in terms of the GATE program. So I'll give way, not too long.
Thank you very much for giving way. Could you tell us where in the manifesto, where in my presentation, where in the budget speech did we say that we are going to give a means test? Could you explain that to us, please?
Go ahead. On a needs basis. It will be reviewed.
We will get that information for you, but on your manifesto here, which is the PNM manifesto, which I have before me, in case if you did not see it, I have it. It says here, remains relevant, easily accessible, and available to all citizens. But we will find where you said that. Yes, we have it here, but we will find that for you now. Support our 2 public universities. We have been supporting the 2 public universities. Develop a culture of discipline, production, and tolerance in all schools. That's going on now, although there is some degree of indiscipline. Sustainable school maintenance program to cope with our aging school infrastructure. Let me deal with that immediately. When we came into office, we met an extremely dilapidated school infrastructure. We have 134 secondary schools, 476 primary schools, and we had over 210 early childhood education centers. And you admitted just a while ago, Honorable Minister of Education, that in the primary school alone, more than 60% of these, more than 50 years of age. So 60% of 470 schools is 6 by 742, but nearly 300 schools, 282 schools. So 282 schools, you are admitting more than 50 years of age. Your previous government between 2002 to 2010, what did you do during that time? You must ask your colleagues who served during that time. They built 22 early childhood education centers and 7 primary schools in 9 years, knowing that those schools were bad. You know what we had to do, as you admitted, and as the documents here have indicated? We built 102 new schools in Trinidad and Tobago, 62 early childhood education centers, 31 primary schools, and 9 secondary schools, including the Beach High School, which we had to do a much more work, which you had closed down for almost 11 years. You had closed the Beach High School for whatever reason. In addition, we have 9, if you ask where are these schools, you haven't got the answer. We have the answer on the website. We have it on the Ministry of Education website, and it has been circulated via Facebook on the social media. It is for everybody to see. We had an 8-page supplement showing the photograph of each school that we constructed. So you could find the 102 schools. We also constructed 98 new, we are also in the process of constructing another 98 schools. It's about 55 ECC centers. The primary schools that are under construction now is about 39, Honorable Minister. So 55 and 39 is about 94. And we have, well, they said 5 secondary schools to be completed. In addition, you will find that there are a number of schools that need science administrative blocks. And we have 11 of those schools that have science and administrative blocks under construction at the moment. So that's 102 completed, 98 under construction, and 11 more science and secondary school blocks. I exhort you, Honorable Minister, to continue the improvement in the infrastructure of the schools. You will have to ask your Minister of Finance to get some funding for you to do that. And somebody raised the issue of the cost. I think it was a member for Laventil West in the early childhood education centers. When we came in, the Haji group had started some construction to some ECC centers. And they fled the country, having gone with $60 million with contractors unpaid. And a number of contractors went belly up. They came begging to find out where we can get the money to pay them. Unfortunately, it was the Haji Construction Group, Madam Speaker, who took the $60 million that was allocated for the construction of ECC centers and went away with it. So we had to complete those. We went on with IADB to do another 24 ECC centers. And then we began to do some outside of that in the Bill 100 program. For the member for Laventil West, the Honorable Minister of Works and Infrastructure, the cost of the ECC center with the IADB, with the first 24 that we did, was approximately $6.5 million. And that included everything, contingency, and it's a contingency, and I can't remember the terminology, but which would account for about 20% of the cost, which the contractors generally do not claim. 4 to 5 years later, the schools that were being constructed during your time with the Haji, that you built 22, there was a different design, a better design to allow better ventilation. And when you pass along the highway, you would see the new type of school. The Malabar School is right there for you to see. And across the country, you see a number of these ECC centers. They are a state of the art to behold. Now, those that were 6.5 million were housing 50 students. We decided to house now 75 students in the center, and that went to 7.5 at an average 8. The maximum, I am advised by EFCL that the maximum that they have for the construction of these ECC centers is about $8.5 million, including the contingency and another fee that is used by the contractors.
Just read there, and then Minister's there. And this is the budget statement.
Right.
This first, and then the explanation.
Madam Speaker, I want to refer that in the budget statement, page 35, including, if you want me to read the entire paragraph, we will hold extensive consultations with the national community on the most efficient manner for administering an effective education program, including the GATE program, with the primary objective being to ensure that assistance with education expenses is given to those most in need of it. What do they mean by that? And it is in bold language here, those most in need of it.
This is what the Prime Minister said he meant. Express.
How are you going to choose them?
Yes.
You don't believe the Prime Minister?
On Express. Yeah. By Kim Bodram, return of property tax not interferes SPM. Rowley, addressing the media alongside Imbert after the presentation, said that the population was essentially given a gift of $1 billion in accumulated uncollected property and so on. And I want to go on here. Gate. An expenditure that vast will, however, require independent expertise. And he advised yesterday, experts are already on their way to Trinidad from the Inter-American Development Bank to go over the possibility of the project. But the part on the gate is, Rowley said it was possible that with declining revenue, those who could afford to pay their way through tertiary education will be asked to do so. What does that say?
Continue by having a means test.
While those who need financial assistance will continue to benefit from the gate, on the heels of fears that gate was to suffer the axe yesterday under a dreadful economy, Rowley said subsidized education for all was conceptualized when the country was flush with money. Now here's this thing. Under a different reality today, he said, a means test for candidates should not be out of the question. And that is from your Honorable Prime Minister, who said that a means test. So what about those 18,000 students who are at university now?
Carried also in the Guardian.
And that was carried in the Guardian as well. What about those 18,000 students who are in the education system now? Would they have to stop the education program?
Members, please.
Your means test? What is your means test going to do? Do they have to have a party card for the means test? Yes? Yes?
Through the Speaker.
So, Madam Speaker, this is the issue that we are raising. Yeah. So I was speaking about the infrastructure. So that's the primary school, that's the ECC. The primary schools. We met primary schools under construction, the 7 that you all built. We had to finish 1. The cost of that was $40.3 million. How much? 40.3. There was no school, primary school, that we built for more than $33 million. Our primary schools that we built, the 31, ranged from 7 million, 9 million, 11, 13, 15, 17, 23, 25, depending on the size of the school and how many students, whether it's 250 students, 400 students, or 600 students. And we were able to construct primary schools at a cost less than $1,000 per square foot. Yeah, one of the cheapest, the least expensive, that most economical school that you could construct, a value for money, less than $1,000. You know what is the rate outside there for construction? Between $1,500 to $2,000 minimum. And we were, EFCL was able to construct these primary schools at less than $800, $900, $1,011. The Member of Parliament for Port of Spain South, when we went to open her school at Rose Hill, and the member for Diego Martin West, where we went to the Point Commander RC School, and the member for Diego Martin Northeast, when we went to open the school at Paramin. We showed where those schools cost less than $1,000 per square foot. And if you see the state of the art, so when the Member of Parliament, the Honourable Minister of Education, speaks about the type of schools and shoddy work, I invite you all to go to the schools and see for themselves. Who went there? The IADB themselves visited the schools to check to see how they were spending their money, Madam Speaker. And the IADB was so satisfied with the first 24 that we built. They said go ahead with the next 29 because they were so satisfied with the work that we did. So I want to just finish some of the things that the Honourable Minister spoke about. He said people were banned from having meetings with the ministry. There was one instance where a senior member of the tutor threatened to beat me up and I had to run away from a school. And you can imagine, I mean, I am big and I'm strong. If I decided to retaliate, you know what would have happened? So, well, that's I said, look, I'm fearful for my life.
Decline the invitation.
I would prefer him not to come at the Ministry of Education for the time being. I met him around the Savannah one day, and I went and hugged him up, and things began to continue just normally. And we went on to have a...
You hug it out.
You know, that's the type of person I am. You indicated that you want to have some continued work on the administrative framework for the education sector. We had done some organizational restructuring and institutional strengthening and ensured that we have 27 units and 14 departments, and we had regular SET meetings, strategic executive team meetings, where everybody came together and we made decisions collectively. And that framework is in place, and I would exhort you to have a look at it to see what areas there you will want to take a page from its book. School supervision and school management. Madam Speaker, we ensured that we brought on local school boards for 83 government secondary schools, comprising 3 members of the community, the principal, 2 members of the PTA, 1 from tutor, a member of the student council, and a member of the alumni, to form those local school boards which can assist the principal in the day-to-day duty. We also brought on school-based management system, where you had a team of about 7 or 8 individuals from the school, together with the health and safety officers, the deans of discipline, and members of the student council, to form another school-based management team who were able, and we began to train them on what are some of the issues that are necessary for their assistance in management of the schools. You mentioned something about skills training and science and technology, but there's no way that we're seeing in education where you're incorporating the skills training and science and technology. Perhaps you can tell us a little more about that when we ask you some questions in the Finance Committee meeting. You said that there has been little progress in the Education Act. We made significant progress in the Education Act. We had consultations for about a year and a half, and we had before the Legislative Review Committee a number of changes that we needed to have made. We made one significant change meanwhile, and that was to ensure that students, the compulsory age now, which was 6 to 12, has now moved from 5 to 16. And that is part of the Children's Authority and the Child Act, the Children's Act. That is incorporated there, which takes care of the part in the Education Act that compulsory age is 5 to 16. Now, let me go into other parts of the manifesto. You said, so I dealt with the issue of school maintenance. Do you know, Madam Speaker, that over the 5 years, we did close to 5,000 repair and maintenance projects in all the schools, more than 800 schools. The 2014 vacation period, we did 320 repair and maintenance projects. True, at the end of it, about 4 or 5 schools didn't open at the time. But could you imagine if we had not done those 320 repair and maintenance projects? 320 schools were not going to be open. This year again, it was 329, Honorable Minister of Education. Check with them. We did 329 repair and maintenance projects, and was cost-effective, value for money, because my understanding that EFCL had to do the open tendering, and the lease value, people were complaining that they were not making any profit as a result of what was going on in terms of the repair and maintenance. So it's a mammoth undertaking, it's a mammoth task in terms of the infrastructure. I wish the Honourable Minister well, and I wish the new board of EFCL success in continuing the programs that we worked with over a long period of time. So your statement of replace all outdated or old and dilapidated schools with new modern buildings and facilities, we have been doing that. I showed you what we did. Construct new schools in areas where they are most needed. I want to address one of the colleagues on the other side who made mention of inequity. And they keep peddling that statement from since we were in the last government. The opposition at the time peddled that in misinformation. Madam Speaker, in the 102 schools we built, 19 ECC centers were along the east-west corridor. Yes? And 11 of the primary schools were along east-west corridor. 11 out of 31 and 19 out of 62. For every corner, every nook and cranny. And politics has, education has no politics. Health has no politics. The child, every child deserves an equal chance, and no child must be left behind. And my Honorable Prime Minister at that time told me, Minister, make sure that you do the work for all the children of Trinidad and Tobago. And in my 5-year period, Madam Speaker, I believe that there is no one who could accuse our government and your previous Minister of Education of showing any bias and lack of equity in any situation. I worked for all the children because first, it was my Prime Minister's heart and desire for the children of this country. And I, who having delivered thousands of them myself, my heart was with all of them. And it was a joy and privilege for me to be working on behalf of all the children. Yeah. History has been part of the revised secondary school curriculum. And what we envisaged, what we wanted to make sure happen, Madam Speaker, is to bring in stream science, technology, research, engineering, arts, and mathematics. And this is why we began constructing more science and administrative labs. And we brought in visual and performing arts to be an important part of the curriculum in the secondary schools. It's now an important part of the curriculum in the primary schools, physical education and visual and performing arts. Cultural education, science and technology. So you said you want the challenging role of science and technology. Training of our teachers. We have trained more than 6,000 teachers in different aspects of teacher training. Pedagogical skills, ICT, science, mathematics, language arts, and so many different areas, management. And I will anchor my sentiment that I would be comforted with your continuation of the widespread teacher training, which is, as you have been a principal for primary school and secondary school, you know the importance of teacher training and development. We did that, and we will look forward to you continuing in that trend, because the biggest resource for any school, any education system is the teacher. Best practices in the administration of the educational system, I touched on that. This is from your manifesto. Equip all schools to benefit from technological innovation. I told you what we have done in technology. We have in fact done that already. Ensure that all students in schools have free and easy access to fast broadband internet in all schools, not just laptops. All our secondary schools have internet connectivity. Some may have less than 5 megabytes, some have between 5 to 15 megabytes, and some have up to 50 megabytes. We as a government had put out a tender to increase the broadband connectivity to the schools, Madam Speaker, because we believe that by sharing the connectivity, a lot of schools were not getting it as fast as possible. So we wanted to have all primary schools with 25 megabytes and all secondary schools with 50 megabytes. And we were working towards that. Perhaps you can look to continue that. It's going to be an expensive proposition, but it is very important. If you put internet connectivity to that speed at each one of the schools, that will be immediate hotspots for broadband connectivity to the homes surrounding there. So you can use the school as a pivotal area for the broadband connectivity and for Wi-Fi to the neighboring areas. So perhaps you can lead that on behalf of the Ministry of Education for the rest of the country. And I went through this, the school curriculum, continuous updating. We have completed the curriculum of early childhood education, primary school and secondary school curriculum reform. Maintain first world standards in terms of enrollment and participation of our citizens in post-secondary and tertiary education. My distinguished colleague, the Member of Parliament for Chaguanas East, will deal with that. Ensure universal early childhood education and continue our system of universal secondary and tertiary education. All this is going on already. Fully integrate sports, culture, language arts, and physical education into education system. And this is your one page in your PNM manifesto on education, all of which we have completed and we have been continuing. Nothing new on your manifesto on education. We look forward to see what are the new areas that they can look at. So just continue with some of the work that we have been doing. So he spoke about the culture of research. I told him where we had moved with that. School-based management and leadership training, quality of work done at EFCL, that spoke for itself. The value for money, where they are needed across Trinidad and Tobago, and the qualified staff. We ensured that to bring about universal early childhood education, we need to train our teachers. And we have over 1,000 teachers now who are trained with a certificate in education or a bachelor's of education in early childhood education. And our schools, teacher to student ratio in our ECC centers is better than best practice around the world. In some of our schools, we have one early childhood education teacher to 10 students. So in a school with 50 students, we have about 5 teachers with either a bachelor's or a certificate. And the best practice is 1 in 15 around the world. And we have hundreds of student teachers now in different universities training in ECC. We believe it's close to about 1,200. So the staff is right there, well trained, and with a good curriculum. And members of this distinguished and august House and citizens listening, the transformation in education has gone on and the revolution has started. We need it to continue. The work we do in education now, the results of it cannot be seen in the short term. The work we did for the last 5 years, we will see the benefits of our work from the early childhood education in the primary schools pretty shortly and in the secondary schools.
Honourable Member for Caroni East, your 45 minutes is now spent. If you intend to avail yourself of the additional 10 minutes, could you kindly round up within that time?
I didn't intend to really spend all the time on education, but to speak on the areas of the budget. And so just let me do a few things as far as the budget is concerned. I was disappointed in the manner in which the Honourable Member for the Martin Northeast, the Honourable Minister of Finance, started his budget presentation with the negatives and with the type of delivery that he made and the things that he said about the last government and so on. I would not have time to deal with that, but I was very disappointed with the approach that he took. It was not statesmanlike, and we have been here to see previous ministers of finance who presented their case, their budgets in a different manner, with dignity. And I felt it lacked the statesmanship that it is required of a minister of finance to do. I want to touch on just a few areas. The IMF. They admitted that they want to bring the IMF into Trinidad and they had some discussions with the IMF. And they invited the IMF. Madam Speaker, you could imagine if when we were in government, we invited the IMF to come to the shores of Trinidad and Tobago. That is anathema. And therefore, what the state of the economy was so solid that what would have caused them to bring in the IMF? IMF prescriptions are increase in tax, unemployment, and privatization of assets. And this is in fact what the PNM government is doing now. The business levy, the unemployment levy, the property tax, the increase in VAT. And let me speak about that for just a short time. Yes? The Minister of Finance said that they're going to have an increase in VAT of $4 billion. When you look at this book here, the revenue estimates, Madam Speaker, The revenue estimates show that the amount of VAT they intend to collect is twice the amount that they're receiving now. It's close to $12 billion in VAT.
Where is it coming from?
And the $4 billion that he spoke about is the increase. Where is that money coming from to move from $6 billion to $12 billion? Are they going to tax more and more people with the VAT? Poor people will be suffering, Madam Speaker. So the minister will have to explain what he means by moving VAT by $4 million when in fact the VAT is being moved by $6 billion. In addition,
What about the laptops? They give out any laptops?
no, they haven't given out any
Did you ask him?
laptops. I asked him already, but he hasn't answered that.
All the school textbooks.
Right. Okay, before I finish, I want the minister to answer at some time, the honorable minister, to tell us what is happening with the children with the school textbooks. We had 132 million earmarked under the last budget for the provision of textbooks for students. It was passed by cabinet. The work had already started for the procurement of it. We are being told now that students are being asked to pay for their books, and parents to buy their books for themselves now. And so they need to tell our poor parents about the purchase of these, to buy the books. The minister did not tell us that we are borrowing $6 billion. When we looked at it, in fact, the budget now has moved to $65 billion. So I'm speaking from the draft estimates on Roman numeral 5, where there is a borrowing of $6 billion. So the IMF prescription is not tenable for Trinidad and Tobago. Wherever they have gone, economies have continued to fail. So why have they decided to bring that? The property tax, a lot of my colleagues spoke about that already. I just want to draw to your attention a newspaper article, Daily Express. PNM must come clean on property tax plan. We still have not heard what they are doing about it. And you'll remember hundreds rallied against the government property tax.
Thousands.
And people were beaten. That was on Newsday, rally around against government property tax. November 15, 2009, Sunday on Newsday. And an editorial on Sunday, December 20th, 2009, editorial, no justification for Friday's police brutality. And the editorial went, Friday was not a good day for democracy in Trinidad and Tobago. Citizens exercising their democratic right to protest were hounded and intimidated by police who beat some protesters with batons. They arrested prominent trade unionist David Abdullah. And I have a photograph where my colleague for St. Augustine is in the photograph, and the police waging his battle in the crowd. And that is the same property tax that you all are bringing back. You all have to answer a lot of questions of this property tax. Then the issue of the Revenue Authority. The last time this Revenue Authority was brought up by the PNM in 2009, they had a lot of questions to answer. Whether 2,000 people were going to lose their jobs. And people had to resign for their jobs and reapply. And then in the reapplication, they will be considered for their job. They have to explain, is this going to continue with the Revenue Authority? Are people going to lose their jobs? Is there going to be political victimization in the reemployment? And before I close, in the last 3 or 4 minutes, Madam Speaker, I want to read an article written by Michael Harris, one of the former, a major commentator on the Daily Express, Monday, 12th of October. And I quote from Michael Harris, "I am afraid I cannot join the chorus of commentators who have been singing the praises of the budget presented last Monday by the Minister of Finance. As far as I'm concerned, far from it being a good budget, or just what courageous budget, what the Minister presented last Monday was a smorgasbord of contradictory measures, lacking in coherence and vision, and serving only to make it more certain that ours shall be a painful reckoning. The first of these questions is immediate and urgent, and is simply put, how are we going to reconcile and bring into balance 63 billion of expenditure versus 41 billion of revenue? That's a question being asked by every person around Trinidad. You have a budget of $63 billion. You have 41 billion in revenue. Where are you going to get the other 22 billion from? The consequences of not reconciling in one way or the other, those two figures will be disastrous for our country. This is what Harris spoke about. He said as well, so knowing full well the consequences of not answering that question, the minister proceeds to simply duck the issue. For after castigating the previous administration for maintaining expenditure levels by resorting to the extraordinary sources of one-off financing, which was unsustainable, the minister then proceeds to do precisely that to finance his fiscal deficit. And the second question he asked, which the minister needed to address, was the perennial one of how do we proceed to diversify the economy. In a budget of more than 75 pages, he devotes 3 pages to the issue of diversification. And Moody's Investor Services cited among the most important factors our limited economic diversification, which weighs heavily on economic growth trends. I have information from Moody's, Madam Speaker, which showed that the petroleum sector grew from 2011 to 2014, and the services sector grew directly opposite to what they are touting. They said that we had a deficit as far as the non-energy sector and the petroleum sector, but this graph shows it very emphatically, Madam Speaker. And so as I close, I want to refer the members of the government to Standard & Poor's credit rating for Trinidad and Tobago stands at A. Moody's rating for Trinidad and Tobago sovereign debt is Baa2. And Moody's report spoke very glowingly of the relatively high income levels by Trinidad and Tobago and the country's good heritage and stabilization fund. So, Madam Speaker, when the Minister of Finance says that we're in a perilous state of the economy, that's a myth, that is wrong, that is untruth. That is not valid, because we left Trinidad and Tobago's economy very strong and very resilient to face the oncoming few years to come, where the price of oil and the price of gas might be low. So I thank you very much for the opportunity to address these questions. I wish I had more time to speak about the finance aspect, but I had to respond to the education as well. Thank you very much.
Honourable members, it is now 4:25. I want to suggest that we break for tea at this time. Therefore, the House is now suspended for 30 minutes.